Hello, my loves. We're in front of the bookshelf. How exciting is that? If you have not seen me organize and put everything into place on this bookshelf, then I will leave a link somewhere. Go and watch that. I can't believe that October is already over. I feel like I blinked and it just passed. I'm quite sad about it. October is one of my favorite months, but I am very much enjoying the fact that it's getting colder. I can wear jumpers again. I'm not hot all the time. That is wonderful. So because it was spooky month this month, I only read like spooky supernatural kind of books to try and like really get myself into that mood, because it does just feel like this year has gone so quickly. It doesn't really feel like there's been any transition between summer and autumn. It just kind of suddenly changed. I wasn't feeling fully spooky, and reading some of these books has definitely put me in the mood. And it's actually Halloween as I'm filming this, so very much on theme. We're going to be talking about all these spooky, supernatural, paranormal books. So get yourself a drink, enjoy. Side note, my hair is really annoying me today. It's just not doing what I want it to, and the half up was annoying me, so we're just going with this, okay? So the first book is The Bog Wife by Chronister. I rated this 4 stars. I really enjoyed this. This is a book that I've been meaning to read for a really long time. It had been like on my TBR for quite a while. This felt like the perfect time of year to read it, and it was immediately available on the library, so I was like, the stars have aligned, this is perfect, this is a sign I'm supposed to read this book. So The Bog Wife is about a very secluded family who live on this like massive estate. There's this like falling down, crumbling stone gothic house that they live in. There's like, is there 5 siblings? I can't remember. I think there's 5 siblings, and they've been brought up being told that they are born of the bog. So there's a bog on their land, and their mum was created from the bog. They are the bog's children, and it is their jobs to be like custodians of the bog. They have to look after it, make sure it's healthy. It's clearly not very well. Things are going wrong. It seems like it's getting sick. One of the sisters left and has now come back. They're not really sure how to fix it or what's going on. We get different points of view from all of the different siblings, which was interesting and I personally quite enjoyed. I liked most of them about the same amount. I didn't really have a favorite. There was one who I definitely liked a lot less than the rest, Nora. The rest of them were all just kind of okay. Seeing different characters' points of view, I think really worked in this book though, because we got to see how the like indoctrination almost of this family had affected them all differently. And it also allowed the plot to progress quite well, because different characters were finding out different things at different times. So it allowed us to start to piece things together even when they maybe weren't on the same page, which I think not only helped carry it forward, but also helped with that idea of like, you start to get like hints of what you think might be happening, but then you switch to a different character's point of view and like maybe they find something else out or there's something different, and then you're like, wait. And I just think this did a really good job of revealing things in a way that like you went into the book thinking you knew what was going on and then realizing maybe you didn't, and then again thinking actually maybe you did, and then realizing once again that you didn't. I like those kind of books. I like those kind of books where you're not ever 100% sure what's really happening. Especially there was some, I suppose, elements of magical realism in this from an outside perspective with how like certain things are being revealed or discussed. You think maybe everything they've been told is a lie, but then you're not really sure, and it's left a little bit ambiguous, and I like that. I like being confused. I like being like, what the fuck is going on, when it's deliberate and purposeful, which is what this book very much was. It was very, very gothic, creepy in atmosphere, the land is alive kind of feeling. It almost sort of reminded me of We've Always Lived in the Castle a little bit, in terms of that feeling of like just a weird little family doing weird little things. You can tell something is clearly wrong with them, but you're not really 100% sure if they're justified in what's wrong with them. It was that kind of feeling. And I suppose on that, no, I wouldn't necessarily say this is scary, although it is technically a horror. I think I would say this was more just creepy and mysterious, and like you wanted to figure out the mystery of this place and this family rather than it like invoking fear. I think all of the books here are more in that vein rather than being actually scary, because I don't tend to read things that are actually scary because I am a wimp. Taking a rapid turn away from creepy horror, I read Hot for Slayer by Ali Hazelwood. This is from a collection for It's like Amazon Originals, I think. A lot of short stories and novellas specifically written for Halloween, so they're supposed to be like spooky paranormal romances. I literally only re-got a Kindle Unlimited subscription so I could read this specific Ali Hazelwood one. I fully intended to read all of the others, but I just didn't. I might at some point because I still have the subscription. But this one was so good that I was just worried that I would then be disappointed by the rest, so I didn't read any more of them. This is a very short novella following a vampire whose name I have forgotten. She has been stalked through the centuries by a vampire slayer whose task it is to wipe out her entire bloodline. But of course it's a romance. I loved this. I really, really, really liked this. I feel like Ali does these short stories, like these little novellas, really well. She did one for the Christmas collection for Amazon Originals last year, and I loved it. I personally find it quite impressive how she's able to develop the characters and give like the illusion of us having spent time with the characters or there being a lot of history between these characters when it is such a short story. I think it took me an hour or less to read. Like, for all intents and purposes, if we're comparing it to fan fiction, it's the length of a one-shot, but we don't have any prior knowledge of these characters, so the fact that she can build all of that, and I always feel like I've been in the story longer than I actually have, I personally find quite impressive. And within that as well, the like build up of the relationship, even though it is really short, it felt satisfying. It didn't feel rushed in the way that it does sometimes even in some full-length novels, because we got all of that history sort of interspersed throughout. It felt satisfying because it wasn't like they're just suddenly together. We could see how this developed. I really liked the dynamic between these characters. I would say my only small criticism would be, so the whole plot of this that probably I should have mentioned earlier is that the vampire slayer, whose name I have forgotten, he loses all of his memories. He just happens to be with this vampire Ethel that he's been trying to kill when he comes back around. So she has to try and help him, or maybe not help him remember who he is because he wants to kill her. We got a little glimpse of their dynamic when, you know, he could remember everything and he was hunting her down and trying to kill her right at the beginning. I really enjoyed that dynamic. Obviously it was a little bit different then after he lost his memories and couldn't remember who he was. I still liked that dynamic, I just didn't like it quite as much as like when they were enemies and fighting each other, which probably says something about me, but you know, whatever. But it was still good, and it was cute and funny, and you know, there was a little bit of action in there as well, because obviously he's been trying to kill her for ages and there was someone else trying to kill her too, so there was still all of that. It was just really good. Also, I actually really liked the male main character, the vampire slayer, who I'm sorry, yeah, I can't remember his name, so clearly he didn't leave that much of an impression on me, but I did really like him. I found him quite funny, but also quite sweet. It's very, very rare for me, I've realized, to like male main characters in books, especially because these days a lot of them just all feel very similar, but I really liked him. And that makes me wish this had been longer and like a full-length novel and we'd got to see more of that, and him and her and their dynamic, but there was enough of it in this that I really enjoyed it. If you have read any of the books in this collection, I can't actually remember what it's called, but if you have, what did you think of them? Did you like them? Are the rest of them as good as the Ali Hazelwood one? Because I seem to remember with the Christmas one last year, I read Ali's one, loved it, and then I read, was it the Tessa Bailey one? And it was awful, and then I didn't read any of the rest of them because it was so bad, and I think that's maybe why I haven't read any of the rest of them this year, because I am scared that I won't like them. So if you have read the whole collection, please tell me what you think and if the rest of them are worth reading. On a similar vampire vein, the next book I read was Bury Our Bones in the Midnight Soil by V.E. Schwab. Look, you could not expect me to have anything less than at least a couple of vampire books in spooky month. You just couldn't. This book actually took me an embarrassingly long amount of time to read. I started this when I was still kind of in a bit of like a reading slump and I wasn't really reading much, so I started this on the 13th of August and I finished it on the 22nd of this month. That's the longest it's taken me to read a book in a very long time. And that's not because it was bad or I wasn't enjoying it. It was really good. I was just struggling to read, and that's okay. I also can't believe this is my first ever V.E. Schwab book. I have known for a very long time that she would probably be an author that I liked, and yeah, this book has proved it. I loved the writing, the characters, everything. So I will definitely be reading more of her books after this. So we get 3 different points of view in this from 3 different women. We get Maria in the 1500s, Charlotte in the 1800s, and Alice in 2015. And throughout the story, we sort of learn how all their paths are linked, and they sort of meet and develop some interesting relationships, slightly toxic relationships. I think I said this in a previous video about I'd heard it was just about toxic lesbian vampires, and I was like, sign me up. That is very much what this is about, and it was really good. For the most part, I really do like how much time we spent with each individual women and in their different time periods, because I do think it helped us get to know them better and their stories and their motivations and their personalities, and also to like develop them and see how they change over the years. I do feel like Charlotte's point of view was introduced a little bit too late for me to like properly get invested in her. I understand why it was introduced later, like it made sense from a storytelling point of view, but unfortunately I just found her a little bit annoying. She was definitely my least favorite of the 3. Alice was easily my favorite, and she'd kind of been there in and out from the start. So when we were then suddenly hit with like 20 chapters in a row of Charlotte without either of the others, I was a bit like, ugh. Maria was very much the focus at the beginning of the story. I mean, she's kind of somewhat the focus throughout, but like her point of view is very much the focus at the beginning, and I did really like how much time we spent with her. I love the 1500s and all of the other time periods she was in, so of course I was gonna like that. I also liked that we got to see so much of her development, especially when you compare where she started at the beginning to where we get to at the end. I think it was a really good decision to do it like that, and even though in the grand scheme of the story it didn't really add much, we got a lot of seeing her with like other vampires and other people and making different relationships and just sort of like traveling through time and people. I think just fleshed out her story, fleshed out the world in general, even though in the grand scheme of things the story is not about, you know, her just meeting all these other people. It's about the relationships and the conflicts between these 3 women. I liked seeing all these various different people she met, all these various different places she went. It was really good. By the time we got to the 20th century, especially in Charlotte's point of view, I was at points getting a little bit lost or confused in terms of like when in time we were, but not to the extent where I couldn't still like keep up or understand what was happening. Like it was still fine. It was just a bit like it started moving a bit quickly but then randomly slowly as well, so I couldn't tell if like, for example, we were still in the 20s or are we in the 40s now, what's happening. But that is also partly my fault, because at the beginning of every chapter it does say what year it's set in, and I just kind of would glance at that and then forget it immediately. I don't really have much else to say other than that it was really good. The ending was great, and Alice is a fucking legend. That's all I have to say. We're going back to Ali Hazelwood. I'm sorry, I can't help it, but it was the release month of May, so of course I read May. Because look, if Ali wrote it, I'm gonna read it, and I'm probably going to like it as well. It had been quite a long time since I read Bride, and so I did not remember as much as I thought I did from it, and that did leave me at points a little bit confused, which is entirely my own fault. I had wanted to reread Bride before reading May. I just didn't. It wasn't bad enough that I couldn't still follow along and like understand what was happening, but I do feel like I would have enjoyed it more had I reread Bride first. A summary to the best of my ability. So in Bride, obviously we meet Misery, our favorite vampire, and Lo, the werewolf, and Misery has to marry Lo, who is an alpha in the werewolf pack, to try and form like an alliance between the werewolves and the vampires, because they've been fighting for ages. But also Misery's best friend, and I think like almost like adopted sister, Serena, had been kidnapped by the werewolves and kept there, or kidnapped by the vampires. I don't really remember, but Serena was kidnapped at one point and Misery had to try and save her or something. I think that's the most important things we need to know from Bride. Our main character and mate is Serena, who is a half human, half werewolf, and because she's a hybrid, there's a lot of interest in her. A lot of people thought this wasn't possible. The humans are a bit concerned by it, the vampires are very concerned by it, and some of the werewolves feel like she doesn't really belong with them because she's not a full werewolf. She's basically trying to navigate all of this and keep safe, and she is being looked after by Cohen, who is Lo's good friend. Cohen's kind of grumpy. He's the alpha of his pack. He just says things like they are and doesn't really have a lot of emotion. From the beginning, he knows that Serena is his mate, but he's like, we can't do anything. Nothing's gonna happen. I just need you to know so you know the truth. So Serena is then trying to keep herself safe from all of these threats and attacks, deal with what might potentially be a very serious illness, and deal with the fact that Cohen is her mate, but nothing can happen between them. That is where we are in Mate. I really liked Serena as a main character, actually. She's very, very different to Misery. Obviously, Misery, as you would expect with the name, is quite miserable. She's very stoic, deadpan, sarcastic, very Wednesday. But Serena is a lot more, she uses a lot more humor, I think, and is just generally like a little bit more lighthearted. It was a nice difference to see that, especially because although we were in the wolf world in Bride, in Mate, obviously everyone's a wolf. Serena's half wolf, but she's still a wolf, and she has some very wolf problems in this book. I think that just fitted, especially because Cohen is he's very stoic. He is very funny at times, but he really does just say what he's feeling. He says the truth. He doesn't sugarcoat things. He takes his pack seriously and managing it. In general, he's very serious. And so having Serena as more like lighthearted sort of balanced it. It didn't feel quite to the extent of fully being like grumpy sunshine, but I feel like she was enough lightness to balance out her constant lying to try and not worry other people and like keeping things to herself because she didn't want to burden other people's, while very relatable, was a little bit annoying at times. And it was like, babe, just stop. You're making everything so much worse for yourself. Just tell some people some things that are going on, please. But for the most part, she was fine. We all have our flaws. Cohen was alright. I mean, I've kind of described him there, but like, he didn't really feel like he had much personality. I didn't really feel like there was much development from him. He didn't really change at all throughout the book, but I think that was kind of the point in terms of what you see is very what you get with him. He was honest and upfront from the beginning, and he just kind of remained that way, so there wasn't really a huge amount of change or development from him. It's not like that thing of, you know, when you get a main male character who's very grumpy and sarcastic and stoic and doesn't really say a lot or give a lot of emotion, and then by the end of the book he's like writing fucking sonnets for the main character and has done complete 180. It wasn't like that. He remained as him, which I suppose actually is kind of a good thing, because I find it quite annoying when that changes. I liked his personality the way it was, and although it didn't really give a huge amount and he was kind of just a bit meh in some aspects, I did find him very funny. Like I said, some of his reactions to things and just the fact that he was so deadpan was quite funny, but he also wasn't like the most engaging love interest we've ever had in an Ali Hazelwood book, in my opinion. The side characters did also not feel super fleshed out. I couldn't really tell you anything about any of them, but they weren't really the main point for a lot of this, because of the things that, like the threats that are present and also the things that Serena is experiencing. It is just kind of her either on her own or with Cohen. I don't really care that the main characters weren't really super fleshed out. I don't really care that there wasn't like a whole group of them. I'm kind of fine with them just being in the background and not like super massive parts of the story, to be honest. There are like, alongside the romance, two main plot points that run within this book. Well, I suppose actually technically you could say there's three, although one of them is kind of tied to the romance. The main things are like the threat towards Serena's life, just from the fact that she's a hybrid. I do feel like the two main plot points there that aren't just about romance, they were good, they were decent enough to keep the story going. I don't feel like there was maybe quite as much plot as there was in Bride. It did feel like one of the plot points specifically got solved very quickly. It did just make me laugh that like the main thing that it felt like this is gonna be a really big deal, it was then like, oh no, that's fine now, don't worry about that. That's done. And it is a romance, so, you know, I'm not holding my breath for too much plot here, really. The main plot is all of the werewolf shit. And God, is this a very wolfy romance. You thought Bride was bad? No, wait for me. Bride, obviously one of the participants in that relationship, is a vampire, so it's not fully wolfy. This, where they're basically both wolves, is so Wattpad wolf book. And like, I'm not saying that like it's a bad thing. It was, I could see from a mile off what was gonna happen in this book, and I was here for it. I was fine with it. We of course got the obligatory cringe as fuck line about a knot that was supposed to be like, you know, really sexy dirty talk, and it was actually just like, ugh. Like, I actually burst out laughing and was like, there it is. I've been waiting for this the whole book. There it is. But look, I am not reading this for like top quality yearning declarations of love. I am reading this to relive my teen years spent reading Teen Wolf fan fiction, and that is exactly what I got from this. So if you too are looking for that, I would really recommend Mate. It was a fun time. It was a fun time. Moving away from silly wolf romance and back into the realms of more like creepy horror. The next book I read was House of Hollow by Krystal Sutherland. I rate this 3 stars in the end. I'm not sure I'm completely sold on that rating, but let's talk about it, and I'll share my workings out. So I had never heard of this book, but apparently it was kind of popular on TikTok. I don't know, I hadn't really seen anything about it, but I found it in a charity shop and it was £1, so I was like, sure. House of Hollow is about 3 sisters, Grey, Vivi, and Iris. Iris is our like main character. She's the one whose point of view we see. But when all of them were children, they all went missing, mysteriously just vanished into thin air for like a month. And when they suddenly miraculously returned, none of them had any knowledge of where they'd been or what had happened to them in that time, but they all appeared to be unharmed, and they just went about their life again as usual, despite the fact that their dad was slightly concerned that maybe something was a bit wrong with them after they came back. Jump forward to their adult life, which is where we are. Grey goes missing again, and Vivi and Iris are left trying to find her, work out what's happened to her, and wondering if it has something to do with what happened to them as children. Honestly, I'm not really sure what my thoughts are on this book. For the most part, I think it was just kind of meh. Oh, I think part of the problem is though, my main thoughts are overshadowed by 2 particular things, which I will get to in a minute. Like, the main plot was okay. There was enough mystery for me to be interested and want to keep reading and not 100% know where it was going or what was going to happen. However, it did very much feel like the plot dragged at times. Like, there were parts where I really just kind of zoned out because it was quite slow at points and quite then difficult to get through, because there were all of these clues that had been left for the sisters, and me as an outsider who doesn't know their sister Grey was like, oh, that's what they need to do based on this clue. But apparently Iris and Vivi, who have known their sister their whole lives, couldn't work out what she was trying to tell them through these hints, and it was incredibly frustrating because it just made the plot like drag out when I don't think it really needed to, which, given that this book is I think less than 300 pages, for it to feel slow is quite surprising. And I think part of that is like the writing to me was just a bit odd. Like, I don't really know how to explain it. Like, it had parts of being like almost like quite rambly in a way that usually I quite like, or like tangenty. We'd get like moments of quite nice descriptions of things, but then there were other times where it was just suddenly so abrupt and like basic. And I'm not saying that like writing needs to be like flowery and descriptive and, you know, use a thesaurus every other word, but it didn't quite match up, and it was just a bit odd. I don't really know how else to explain it, but I think because of that it almost slowed things down a little bit as well, and it made things not really feel like it was flowing very well. I also unfortunately think our main character Iris was the least compelling of all the sisters. It's never explicitly stated how old she is, but she is quite clearly a teenager because she's still at school. I misspoke earlier, her sisters as adults, but she's still very much a teenager. So like I can overlook her like naivety a little bit and her kind of outlook on things. But she was just kind of a bit boring. She didn't really have a whole lot of personality. And I feel like her sisters were just more interesting, but they weren't like fully there enough for it to then carry things. Like Vivi, who was in a band, she had tattoos and piercings and clearly a drug and maybe alcohol problem and was a bit chaotic and kind of had an attitude, but she was very interesting and I would have liked to have seen more of her. Grey was supposed to be like a supermodel, very famous, very wealthy in quite an unrealistic way, but she was like the kind of celebrity where like they're just seen as eccentric and like everyone loves it and just calls it fashion, but clearly there's something a bit wrong with her and she's a bit unhinged. So like they were much more interesting characters in my point of view, but they just weren't there enough. Just everything felt a bit meh. I don't really know how else to say it. I don't really think the plot or the characters will particularly like stay with me or stick with me, but you know what will stick with me? The two things that really, really took over my opinions of this book and I feel like ruined the reading experience, which I get is a me problem. So the first thing, this is clearly supposed to be like, you know, gothic, creepy, Grimm's fairy tale-esque kind of book. So there's supposed to be like a bit of fear, right? A bit of tension. In the first chapter, the very first chapter, our main character Iris shits herself. And I don't mean that in a figure of speech. I mean literally she shits herself, and it's like clearly supposed to demonstrate how in that moment of what happened there she was like so scared that she lost control of her bowels and shat herself. But me, child that I am, just found it hilarious. Like I genuinely sat there for about 5-10 minutes just laughing once I realized that she had indeed shat herself. And then for the next few chapters, every time she got even a little bit scared, I was just like, oh, are you gonna shit yourself again? So that just kind of really undercut any like me taking this seriously or finding anything creepy or scary, because that was in the first chapter and I found it so funny. Like that's my first impression of you, girl, that you're shitting yourself. Like we've all been there, but the second thing is not funny and actually something that I found really annoying. This book is for the most part set in England, with some parts of it taking place in Scotland as well, but we're in the UK, okay? The characters have lived in the UK their whole lives. Every character that we come across is from the UK, and yet it is abundantly obvious that the author is not from the UK. It started with like small things, little words where I was like, oh, that's a bit odd. For example, charity store was just a weird phrase that I was like, I've literally never heard anyone call it a charity store before. We would call it a charity shop. And things like cops and couch, which again, they're things that like maybe some people might say they're a little bit more common, but still they're not like what I would consider the standard words for those things in the UK. But then we got things like sidewalk and garbage and sneakers, and I was like, okay, we don't say any of those words. We don't say any of those words. You are so clearly not from the UK, and you're writing characters that are supposed to be from the UK and they're saying things that we would never say. But then the final nail in the coffin, the thing that just made me sit and have to pause the audiobook and just our girl Iris sitting there thinking, oh, she just wants a really normal life. She just wishes she would worry about the normal things that adults worry about, things like taxes and health insurance. Babe, you live in England. You don't ever need to worry about health insurance. And I can say with 99% certainty that none of the adults that you know in your life have ever worried about or mentioned worrying about health insurance to you, because the only adults you know are your mum, who is a nurse, so I'm assuming works for the NHS, and if not, she would probably work for a private healthcare company and she would have healthcare included and therefore would not need to worry about it and would have never mentioned it. And then the only other adults you know are your teachers, who do not earn enough to have private health insurance, so again would have never mentioned or complained about it because they would be using our free NHS healthcare. You would never worry about that. in the UK. And like, just to put it fully into context, because I'm aware, according to my YouTube analytics, that most of the people who watch me are not from the UK, we do have private health insurance in the UK. You can get private healthcare, but it is most definitely not the norm. The majority of people will just take for granted that they're gonna be using the NHS, and will just take for granted that they're gonna maybe have to wait a little bit longer because the NHS has been chronically underfunded over several years, and therefore it's crumbling on its knees. But we just take that for granted, that that's what we're gonna have. Private healthcare is like a luxury that the majority of people are never even gonna consider. I have used private healthcare because the NHS is slowly being privatized because it's been so underfunded, and therefore they are contracting out to private healthcare. I still would not have to pay for that or need to have health insurance to access that because the NHS has sent me there, and therefore they will pay for it. They're just trying to clear their waiting list. But the majority of people in the UK will never worry about healthcare. So she would never be worrying about it. Why would a teenage girl whose only experience is people who would not have health insurance worry about health insurance, or think that adults are worrying about health insurance? Because she's not chronically online either, so that she's just indoctrinated by all the Americans on social media. No, she would have never worried about that. Now that I think about it as well, it was the health insurance that really got me at the time, but I said there that she'd wanted to worry about taxes and health insurance. Thinking about it, we don't really worry about taxes in the UK either. What I mean by that is, I'm aware in other countries you have to like do your taxes yourself and like file them. We don't have to do that here. Well, if you're employed by a company or a person, your taxes automatically are calculated and taken out of your wages each month or week, or how often you're paid. So you don't really think about them. Sometimes you might look at your wages at the end of the month and go, wow, look at all that money that was taken away from me. Even though I am very pro-tax generally, but still seeing the figure is like, oh, that's kind of annoying. You don't have to worry about them. The only people in this country who would file their taxes are people who are self-employed and then have to do them themselves, or people who are employed but then also do self-employment on the side, or have like a side hustle or something and earn over £1,000 a year and then also have to do additional taxes on that money. And again, all of the adults in Iris's life, her mum and her teachers, would not be filing their own taxes, so they wouldn't be worried about it. Sorry, that was a really long tangent. That was a much longer tangent than I thought it would be. It's something that really, really bothers me, because as someone who lives here, it is so abundantly obvious whenever I spot things like that. It's not even the fact that I particularly care that the authors don't know these things, because I think especially things like specific wording like sneakers or garbage or things like that, you're not going to know that those words are different unless you've lived in the country you're writing about for a prolonged period of time, because it's just really small little things. I don't really care that you don't know those things. What I do care about is that me reading it, I am getting taken out of the story every time I notice it, because it's not what that person would say, and it just makes me very aware that I'm reading and I'm not immersed in the story anymore. That is why I find it annoying, not because I think everyone should know everything about the UK, because to be honest, I don't really give a shit. The UK is a shithole. Why would anyone want to know anything about this country? But you get what I'm saying, you know? Moving on to less ranty topics. The next book is A House with Good Bones by T. Kingfisher, which I rated 4 stars. I honestly don't know why I don't read more T. Kingfisher, because every single time I read one of her books, I love it and think, oh, I should read more of her, and then I just don't for a really long time. Our main character in this is Samantha, who is a 30-something-year-old etymologist. Are they two different things? Which, the insect one, that one, she's due to go on some like research, dig, excavation type thing, and it gets cancelled at the last minute, so she has to go and stay with her mum for a while instead. And she slowly starts to realise that something's not quite right about her mum or the house. So I don't know how T. Kingfisher manages to write horror, creepy shit that is so cozy, because all of her books just have such a cozy vibe to me that they just feel like comforting, even though they are kind of creepy. But again, I never necessarily feel scared by them. I will say in this one, there was a moment where if it hadn't been the middle of the day and I wasn't like cleaning while listening to this audiobook, I may have been a little bit scared. There's a specific part that sort of mentions or talks about sleep paralysis and the experience of it, and as someone who has experienced sleep paralysis and used to experience it quite a lot, I know how fucking scary that shit is. And it, like, that just can really bring up that fear of how terrifying it is when it happens. So if I'd been reading that, like, you know, tucked up in bed late at night, I probably would have been a little bit scared, but thankfully it was the middle of the day and I was all good. I think my absolute favorite thing about T. Kingfisher books is not really the plot. The plot is always good. The plot isn't complicated, it's not overly convoluted, it's simple, but it gets the job done and is enjoyable and satisfying in its conclusion. But my favorite part of all of her books are her characters. I think she just writes characters so well and develops them so well, but also develops their relationships, and not just romantic relationships. There is usually a little bit of romance in her books, and there is in this, but it's always so subtle and it doesn't overshadow the whole plot, and she still develops all the other relationships with like family and friends and neighbors and stuff like that as well, that you usually end up with like a little group of people that this main character has come to know and has like different dynamics or bonds with. She just does it so well. Yeah, I don't know if it's because I always leave so long between like reading one of her books. I always forget how well she does it and how much I enjoy it. So if you're like a character focused reader, I would really recommend her books. I would really recommend them. They are always what I find most enjoyable about her books. You always know you're gonna get some coziness, maybe something that's a little bit creepy, but also just a good bunch of people that have healthy dynamics between each other. And it's, you know, that's a rarity these days, I find. Oh, there was also a really cute bird in this. I mean, there was many birds in this, actually. There were a lot of vultures. I finished this yesterday and I already can't remember the kind of birds they were. But there was one specific bird, one of like her mum's friend's neighbors had rescued because I think one of its wings was broken or missing, and it was just really cute, and it was just hopping around and it would peck at her shoelaces to interact with them. It was a really cute bird. And like, what more can you ask for? I love birds. The final book, which is definitely more on the scary side, is Nothing But Blackened Teeth by Cassandra Khaw. I think that's how you say her name. I finished this book this morning. I haven't really sat down to think about my thoughts on it, so we're going to be discovering that in real time together. This is a very short book. It's supposed to be scary. I'm not sure that it was. Basically, the premise for it is like a group of people go to this old haunted mansion in Japan. I think it's in Japan. Or it's just a Japanese mansion. Two of them are supposed to be getting married, but I don't know if they're supposed to be getting married there. I think they are supposed to be getting married there. I was a little bit confused on what was happening, to be completely honest, and all the dynamics between these different awful characters. But then it's very clearly very haunted and shit goes down, basically, is what happens here. I don't think I particularly liked this book, and you know what? I was scrolling through last night for just something quick I could read, because I just finished A House with Good Bones. I just wanted like something little to be able to then read in the evening and hopefully finish this morning before filming. I think it's only like 150 something pages, so I was like, this is perfect. It's spooky. I don't remember buying this, but sure, let's read this. And then I went to look on Goodreads and realized every single person that I'm friends with on Goodreads who had read this had rated it 1 star, and the average rating is something like 2.5 stars. And I was like, oh. But yeah, I don't think I liked it very much, is generally my thoughts. I don't think I will ever think about this book again. I do appreciate where it's short, it's difficult to like fully develop characters' story and create a creepy enough atmosphere. Hang on a minute, no wait, bear with me 1 second. Yes, what I said still stands. However, I would just like to point you towards this book, The Woman in Black, which is one of the scariest books I've ever read in my life. I had to read this for GCSE English, and I'd also been bamboozled into going and seeing the film, not realizing it was a scary film, because my mom was like, hey, do you want to see Daniel Radcliffe's new film? Gave me no context for what it was about, and I was like, yeah, I do. I like Daniel Radcliffe. And then I was terrified. The reason I'm bringing this up is because this is about 190 pages and this is terrifying. This does have a very creepy atmosphere. You feel very unsettled. The Woman in Black has haunted me for years. Every time I get a little bit scared and I'm like, there's something behind me, I imagine it's her. Immediately she's there. She's terrifying. So while I do think it probably is difficult to build up characters, to build up that creepy atmosphere in a short book, it's clearly fucking possible, because I refuse to ever read this book again or ever look at the film again, because I know I will just be re-traumatized by it. Nothing But Blackened Teeth did not have that, in my opinion. The relationships between all the characters was very confusing, because it was like we were trying to be given backstory, but like the main character, whose name I don't even know, but she was really fucking annoying. She had clearly slept with all of them. It was very messy. But then there was this other girl called Talia who was gonna marry one of them, and she clearly really didn't like main character. Talia's whole personality just seemed to be, she's the woman that's a bitch. Like, it was that cliche, even though main character seemed kind of awful. And then we got little hints of like maybe she was a bit troubled, but it was never like really explained what happened. It was very confusing and very messy, and it was not scary at all. There was no atmosphere. I did not like the writing. Someone on Goodreads had said there's like a simile every other sentence, and they were dead right. And I kind of almost wish I hadn't read that review before reading it, because I probably would have still noticed it, but I maybe wouldn't have noticed it straight away. For such a short book, so many of the word count was used on pointless similes, descriptions that honestly said a whole lot of nothing. It was like every single time someone said something, their voice had to be described, the way they looked had to be described again, and it was all that kind of really pointless description. Like, you know, the classic thing of like, she's all sharp lines and chiseled jaw. Like, that's not what they were saying, but you know what I mean? That kind of description just over and over and over and over and over again. So it just wasn't scary. All of the characters were insufferable and annoying, and I didn't like any of them. Oh, they kept referencing, this is something that really bothers me in books, they kept referencing books and film tropes of the genre this book is written in. It's just a little bit too much for me, okay? Like, I get in real life, maybe if something like that were to happen, you might say that, but we're not in real life. We're in a spooky story where a ghost is trying to kill you. Why are we saying like, oh, we need to leave because you're bisexual and I'm not white, so we're obviously gonna die first, like happens in all the movies? Do we need to be that on the nose? No. And that was like 3 or 4 times that they said things like that. I just didn't really like this. I should have listened to everyone else's reviews and not read it. Yeah, it was kind of a bad way to end the month, but all in all, I do think this was a pretty good reading month, to be fair. I think I enjoyed the majority of things that I read. And on a positive note as well, I think I am fully out of my slump now. I'm back wanting to read again. I think that's the main thing, is I just didn't want to read before, whereas now I feel actually excited to read things and get back into stories and talking shit about books on here. And that is the thing I'm happiest about, regardless of how I felt about some of these books. That is what I'm happiest about. Completely forgot to mention this, but I am hoping to be going back to weekly uploads now. It's been a long time since I've done that. I'm not 100% sure if I'll be able to stick to it, but I'm feeling like I will be able to. I have a pretty good plan of videos for the next few months. As long as I've not really overcommitted and realized I do not have the energy or time, we should hopefully be going back to weekly videos. But if for any reason I'm unable to keep that up, or it's a struggle or whatever, I will try and communicate that better this time. I hope all of you have had a great reading month. I hope you've been reading some spooky stuff. I hope you felt scared and spooky. I don't know. But I hope whatever you've been reading, whether it has been spooky or not, you've been enjoying it. As always, please do let me know what you've been reading. If you've read any of these books, I would love to know. If you have similar or very differing opinions, please let me know. But that is all from me today. So I hope wherever you are, you're having a wonderful day, and I will see you guys soon. Bye.